Welcome back to episode 3 of SM Sports Radio, as we are back for a third consecutive week despite our tech trying its best to keep us off the air this week, as Sam and I both can attest to. But despite that, we are back and ready to talk some more basketball as the regular season has just finished and we get ready for conference tournaments this week. So, Samuel, how did you enjoy this last week of regular season basketball?
Yeah, well, I'm super excited for conference tournaments and March Madness coming up here soon in the next couple weeks in this great month that we call March. But we have a lot of end of regular season games that we can kind of get into, like you just mentioned. We'll go ahead and just start it right off the bat with Florida defeating Alabama 105-87 last Tuesday night. I said on the podcast last week that Walter Clayton Jr. would have a legacy game, and he somewhat delivered on that promise by me. He had 22 points in that game, 15 of those points coming from the free throw line, so not exactly the most traditional 22 points, but he did have a very good game. And then Mark Sears on the other side for Alabama, 33 points in the loss with 29 of those in the second half.
Yeah, Sears was trying his best to keep Alabama in that game, but just too much scoring from Florida. The guard play from the Gators, especially in that one, was amazing, as it has been at home all season. The offensive rebounding continues to be there for Florida, and I think this is a dangerous team come SEC tournament time this week. Over in the Big Ten, a game that we both were kind of surprised, I think, ended up being as good as it was. I think we looked at Purdue kind of just cruising through the end of the season, but Illinois made this a very good game and almost was looking to pull off the upset for a while, holding the lead at multiple points, but in the end, Purdue just too much. Edey with 28, just overcoming the Illini again this year.
Yeah, Marcus Domask really stepped up once again for Illinois. He had 20 points, but kind of as we've mentioned in previous episodes, Illinois needs both he and Terrence Shannon Jr. to have big games to beat these elite teams, and we didn't really see Terrence Shannon Jr. step up in that way. He really struggled mightily in this game, 3 of 13 from the field, and then, like you said, Zach Edey, just way too much. 28 points, 8 rebounds. He's well on his way to winning his second consecutive National Player of the Year, and Purdue has won outright the regular season Big Ten title, and they are looking to bring that momentum into the conference tournament. UConn won at Marquette on Wednesday night, 74-67, in a game that Marquette did not have Tyler Kolek, so a little bit of an asterisk by that one. The first road-ranked win in a decade for UConn, which is kind of mind-boggling, but they can finally get that streak off their back as a burden to them. Alex Karaban really stepped up for UConn in this one, shooting the ball very well from behind the arc. 5 3-pointers made, 23 points for Karaban. Cam Jones had 18 points for Marquette, and Oso Ighodaro with 16 points for Marquette. This is a Marquette squad that I can see giving UConn a run for their money in the conference tournament once they get Tyler Kolek back, but his groin injury still held him out of this one, and so UConn was pretty much able to cruise in this one.
Yeah, this was a game that in our picks last week, we were both talking about if Tyler Kolek plays, I think Marquette can pull this off. But if he's out, we both said we think UConn was going to get a pretty easy win, and they ended up doing so. Then down in the SEC, a big game in Columbia as Tennessee took on South Carolina, and Dalton Knecht again carrying the Volunteers in this one with 26, and what was a very defensive game overall with both teams struggling a lot to score at times.
Yeah, and Tennessee really controlled this game wire to wire. Actually had the opportunity to watch it, and for a while it looked like Tennessee might blow it open and even win by more than 7 points, as South Carolina almost cut it to 5 at the end with that dunk coming a little bit after the buzzer. Last week I predicted that South Carolina would win this one. You can decide for yourself whether or not that was a jinx attempt, but Tennessee did win this one. Knecht with 26 points. He's just been terrific all season. Meechie Johnson, 18 points in the loss, and with that win, Tennessee does win the SEC regular season title outright. So a good season in Knoxville, and they're looking to carry that momentum into the conference tournament, and they're looking to ride the back of the second best player in the country in the NCAA tournament.
For sure. Then over in the Big 12, Iowa State with a gritty win over BYU in a game that they trailed 38-27 at halftime. outscoring the Cougars 41-25 in the second half. And I don't know if you got to watch that game. I was watching the second half of it, and it felt like just as it moved on, this inevitability of Iowa State in that game. It's been almost impossible to win in Ames this year, and Iowa State keeps showing why. This second half, they just kept grinding it out. BYU, I think, kind of felt that inevitability and ended up falling short as a result of it.
Yeah, I love that word, inevitability, and that is what Iowa State has been in that building. We've seen Hilton Magic come through for the Cyclones time and time again this season. No different this week during this game as they outscored BYU 41-25 in the second half. Tamin Lipsey with 19 points for Iowa State, but this is a team that really is built on their defensive identity. They're going to get a lot of stops, really slow you down. Kind of think of a Virginia team with a much better offense, and you get Iowa State. So definitely a team to watch as we move into the conference tournament and also into the big dance. They'll probably be around a 2 seed, maybe a 3.
For sure. Staying in the Big 12, once again, Houston rolls in a game that we both predicted would not be close, and it wasn't, as they destroyed Kansas 76-46. Kansas away from home, plus this dominant Houston team, I think we both knew would be a bit of a recipe for disaster for the Jayhawks, but I don't know if even I thought they would lose by 30.
Yeah, and just everything went wrong for Kansas in this one. 18 turnovers. They couldn't get any kind of offense going. Kevin McCullough Jr. did try to play this one. He started in the first half and played 15 minutes, but then was removed from the game as his knee was still bothering him. He did not score in the 15 minutes that he played. Dickinson later left the game in the second half with a shoulder injury. Still waiting for news on that front for Dickinson. But yeah, this is just a Jayhawk squad that is really struggling, playing its worst basketball of the season at a very bad time. And Houston, like you said, just continues to roll. This time, 4 double-digit scores, so no guy was just on fire. It was just a collective team effort and domination over there in the Big 12, and I will be hard-pressed to see a team that can beat Houston in that Big 12 tournament.
For sure. That Big 12 tournament is going to be, in my opinion, probably the most entertaining conference tournament of the postseason before we get to March Madness, obviously, with how close all of those teams are and how difficult it is to play on the road or at a neutral site in that conference. So I'm super excited to see how that goes. Then over in the ACC, the big rivalry with its second matchup of the year as UNC took on Duke in Cameron Indoor and came out with a win, 84-79, in a very entertaining game, honestly. Both Duke UNC games have been entertaining to watch this season. Partially just because I don't like Duke and UNC has won both, but credit to the Tar Heels for a season sweep. After missing the tournament entirely last year, they take home the ACC regular season title.
Yeah, I definitely also thought that Duke would win this one in the rematch. I thought Cameron Indoor Stadium would be too much for UNC and that they wouldn't get enough shooting and scoring in this one to beat a red-hot Duke team. But Cormac Ryan really silenced that doubt of mine. 31 points, 6 3-pointers made, and I really think he's the X factor for this UNC squad. If he can give them 4 to 5 3-pointers a game in the ACC tournament, in the NCAA tournament, they're going to be a really tough out because you already have to account for consistent guys like R.J. Davis, who's going to win ACC Player of the Year, Harrison Ingram, who's an incredible rebounder and has scored a lot for UNC this season, and not to mention Armando Bacot, who's a veteran that has a lot of experience in these tournaments. So definitely a great win for UNC. Filipowski for Duke, 23 points and 7 rebounds, but once again finding himself in the news for the wrong reasons. Pulled a Grayson Allen after he fell to the deck. He lifted up that right leg and tripped Harrison Ingram. And here's his quote on that situation post-game. This is a direct quote from Kyle Filipowski in the locker room. "I'm not really too sure how that whole situation happened, to be honest. I was really just getting up. My foot slipped. I don't know how I caught him. That's really all I got. I didn't see him coming from anywhere. I didn't know he was back with me. I thought I was the only one left." And I'm just going to call a bunch of...
When I start standing up, I always lift my legs first, yeah.
Yeah, that's just utter BS from Kyle Filipowski. I honestly can't say that I hate the move to trip the guy in this rivalry game. I don't hate that at all, but just take ownership for what you did. Just say, man, I got caught up in the heat of the moment. I'm sorry to Harrison Ingram. But to be honest, I do not buy his excuses at all, and I think that was definitely intentional. What about you?
Oh, for sure. And the question I have for you is how high do you think Kyle Filipowski is getting up there in the rankings of most hated Duke players of all time after this season?
I think for me personally, I know I haven't lived long enough to fully hate all the Duke players over the years, but he's squarely number 2 for me and very close to surpassing Grayson Allen for number 1.
Well, if he achieves nothing else this year, at least he's done that. Finally, the last game that we picked going into this week, FAU and Memphis. A game that you took Memphis in, going for the upset. I took FAU, and frankly, I was very nervous about that FAU pick all week. I almost started agreeing with you by the time game time came that Memphis might pull out a win in that one, but FAU was able to put together a good performance and take home a 92-84 win, largely in part to Vlad Golden.
Yeah, Vlad Golden, a dominant presence inside for FAU. 21 points, 12 rebounds. Naquan Tomlin really has emerged for Memphis, the Kansas State transfer who actually joined Memphis mid-season, enrolled in the spring semester, and has been with them since January. 27 points for Tomlin. And I still think that Memphis would have won this game if they would have allowed fewer offensive rebounds. 16 offensive rebounds allowed in this game. That's always going to be a recipe for disaster, especially against a really good team like FAU. You cannot give that team second and third opportunities to score the basketball, especially at home, and expect to come away with a win.
For sure. It's just, like you said, impossible to expect a win when it comes to that. But speaking of expecting wins, it is time for conference tournaments. I know you and I are both super excited. We both obviously have teams that we think could do pretty well in their respective conference tournaments, and we'll lead it off with the conference that I'm in school in right now with the SEC. So who do you have cutting down the nets in Nashville next week?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to take the Kentucky Wildcats. I've been high on them pretty much all season. I think they're the most talented team, especially in the SEC, but maybe in the whole country. A lot of freshman talent. They're coming off a win in Knoxville against the SEC regular season champions in Tennessee. Dalton Knecht 40 points in that game, and Tennessee still losing. I'm a little concerned about Tennessee for that reason. I do see Tennessee getting to the championship and meeting Kentucky in another rematch there. But I think Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepherd, Antonio Reeves, Justin Edwards, those guys are going to finally play some team basketball, and they're going to cut down the nets there in Nashville. What about you?
Well, I like Kentucky a lot in this too, but I have a different team from that side of the bracket. I am actually taking the Florida Gators to win the SEC tournament this year. I think that the only team that could possibly trip Florida up matchup-wise is Kentucky, but the Gators do have a win over the Wildcats this season. They split that season series. This Florida team right now is absolutely red hot. This offensive rebounding continues to be such a strength for them. The guard play, the scores that they have, I think will really benefit them in a tournament setting. I do think that our two picks, Kentucky and Florida, are going to match up in a semifinal game, and I definitely think whoever wins that game wins the tournament. But for me, I think the Gators will have the edge, purely because I think they can play better defense than Kentucky.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think if Florida does knock off Kentucky, that they are also my favorite going forward. I just trust their guard play the best outside of Kentucky, and I think that just the combination of that and their offensive rebounding could really find them some success there in Nashville. So I like your pick a lot as well.
Yeah, I have to give a shout out to my alma mater, Auburn, of course. It's one team that the metrics love, but after watching us all season, I don't know. I just can't shake the feeling that this team, despite how much is loved by Ken Pom and Net, is maybe going to have a downfall if we can't get more consistent three-point shooting in big games. I know in Knoxville, Dalton Knecht basically beat Auburn single-handedly. I don't know that that'll happen again. I think if Auburn meets Tennessee in this tournament, they can win because of their team defense, but I just don't think they have the elite-level scoring that they need to be able to win in a tournament like this.
Yeah, and going back to Tennessee, we've kind of seen the formula for beating Tennessee as laid out by John Calipari in Kentucky. You kind of just let him get his shots because he's going to get his shots, but then you also, like, someone else is going to have to step up for Tennessee if they're going to win games. So you kind of let Dalton Knecht work for his shots, and he's going to score. You're going to let him score. Obviously not let him score, but he's a defensive liability, so you're going to score a lot on him. he's going to score a lot on you, but Tennessee's not going to advance very far unless guys like Zakai Ziegler, Vescovi, they've got to step up if the Volunteers are going to win this tournament, I think.
For sure. Now over to a conference that has been very near and dear to your heart this season. You've talked about it a lot on the podcast, the ACC. So as a Clemson fan, as a Clemson student now, how far do you think they can make it in this tournament? And then who do you see coming out on top overall?
Yeah, so you can call me biased. I definitely am biased, but I do see Clemson advancing to the ACC championship in this one. They are the 6th seed, but in my opinion, they have a very favorable draw. As in their first game, they'll be playing the winner of Boston College and Miami, 2 teams that have been bottom feeders in the ACC this season. If Clemson wins that game, they'll move on to play a very struggling Virginia team who hasn't really been able to score the ball very much recently. I think Clemson finally gets over the top and beats Tony Bennett in that one. Clemson would then move on to presumably face Duke, a Duke team that they went wire to wire with in Cameron Indoor Stadium. In my opinion, got cheated out of that win. I think Clemson is able to beat Duke in that one. I think we get a rematch between UNC and Clemson in the championship. They split the season series. UNC actually winning in Little John Coliseum, Clemson winning in the Dean Dome for just the second time ever. But I do think that UNC will just be too much. Clemson will not win their first ACC tournament ever.
I also have UNC winning the ACC, but I think they do it over Duke. While I do like this Clemson team, I only see them making it to the semis and getting knocked off by a Duke team that I think is going to be very motivated for another shot at North Carolina, especially for an ACC tournament championship. However, I think the Tar Heels are just too good. I think they're going to be too much for Duke, and I think they win that game. I do want to give a shout out to Wake Forest, a team I think can make some noise in this tournament. If they're hot shooting the ball, they become a very, very difficult team to beat, as Duke found out in that building a couple weeks ago. So I think they could be a sleeper. Like you said, I think Clemson also has a very favorable path. I think Virginia's a very fake top 4 seed. I just don't think Virginia's very good, honestly. So I think that Clemson has an easy path to the semifinals, but I think Duke's going to be too much. And then, obviously, UNC, I think, is the best team in this conference and is going to show that in this tournament.
Yeah, a lot of teams to watch in this one. Wake Forest still probably needs to win a couple games to feel good about their NCAA tournament hopes. The Pitt Panthers are a team that's red hot right now, winners of 5 of their last 6, with the loss coming at Clemson here in Little John Coliseum. Pitt needs to win 2 or 3 games to feel good about getting into the tournament. I think they're in Lenardi's next 4 out right now. Just a lot of teams in the ACC, they're going to be very motivated as they vie for an at-large spot or even that automatic bid. So I think this is going to be a very exciting tournament over there in Washington, D.C. this week.
For sure. Now over to the Big 12. Who do you have and why is it Houston?
Yeah, you guessed it. The Houston Cougars are going to win this tournament. I think the only team that really has a chance to take them down is the Baylor Bears. I just have that level of respect for Scott Drew. But I do think Houston rolls, and I don't really think I have to give too much evidence to support that claim. I think they're the deepest team. I think they're the best defensive team in the Big 12. I think Iowa State is a team that could be a sleeper as well. Not really a sleeper since they're either the 2 or 3 seed. I believe the 2 seed, but
2 seed. Yeah,
definitely going to roll with Houston. Could also see Baylor or Iowa State making some noise.
Yeah, I predicted Baylor is going to match up with Houston in the conference championship game, but I just think this Houston team, like you said, is too good. They're too deep. They just play outstanding on both sides of the basketball, and I just don't really think there's much you can do to stop them at this point. So give me Houston in the Big 12. Then up in Madison Square Garden for the Big East tournament, we have what is going to be another really fun conference tournament. I think a lot of these teams are right on that bubble area. You look at a team like Providence, a team like Villanova that are going to be needing wins to really solidify those spots on the back edge of the tournament field. So do you think those teams can maybe solidify themselves a spot, go on a deep run in this tournament, and who do you think ultimately comes out on top?
Yeah, so I do like Providence and Villanova to win their first round games, but then I think teams like UConn, Creighton, Marquette are just going to be too much past that point. I do like St. John's a lot in this tournament. If they were matching up with anyone but UConn in the quarterfinals. I would have St. John's moving on to at least the semifinals, with this tournament being in Madison Square Garden, which is technically a home venue for St. John's. I like them a lot. They're the last team in the field right now. Rick Pitino is one of the best coaches in the country, but I just don't think their squad matches up well with UConn. I think UConn rolls in this tournament, and they win the Big East tournament over Creighton in the championship.
I have the same conference championship matchup once again with UConn over Creighton. I like this Creighton team. I think they could give UConn a run for their money in the final. I don't think UConn's going to roll so easily to that, but I just think in the end they're going to be too much, even if it is close. And then if they win this conference tournament, end up as the 1 seed for March Madness later, they're going to have a super easy road to the Final Four when you look at where those games are going to be played. So I think it's going to be very hard to stop UConn in the postseason overall this year, starting with this tournament.
Yeah, as John Rothstein has pointed out, they will not have to get on a plane until the Final Four, which is just incredible how the geography sets up in UConn's favor. We hardly ever see a back-to-back champion in college basketball with all the numerous teams that make runs, the Cinderellas, but I'm going to be shocked if UConn loses before the Final Four at this point. I really hope they do, just to see a new team win it, but it's going to be really tough. Donovan Clingan is playing really good basketball coming off of his injury. Alex Caravan, like we mentioned earlier, is shooting the ball very well. Tristan Newton is one of the best point guards in the country, a true freshman. And Dan Hurley is right now the favorite to win Coach of the Year after losing his 5 starters from his national championship team last year. I still think Lamont Paris deserves it more after being picked 14th in the SEC and finishing second, but all signs are pointing to Dan Hurley being National Coach of the Year, and I like UConn a lot in this postseason.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Then over in the Big Ten, another conference tournament. Honestly, this one for me is not as exciting as a lot of other ones we have. I feel like with this tournament, there's a clear top 3 or 4 teams, and then outside of that, games are going to happen. So I'm going with Purdue in this one.
I looked at this bracket and I was like, ew, what is this? This is going to be a very boring tournament. I feel like of the 7 tournaments that we're going to preview, this is definitely the most boring. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And in fitting with that, give me Purdue, a boring team. So the team with Zach Edey, I think, is going to come out on top in this one, and that happens to be Purdue. You know what John Rothstein says, death taxes Matt Painter. I think this is going to be a very inevitable feeling tournament the whole way through.
Yeah, and it's really weird not trusting a Michigan State team to go very far, especially a team coached by Tom Izzo, who we know is inevitable in March usually, but this season I just don't see Tyson Walker and company going very far in this tournament. I have Purdue and Illinois in the championship, so we'll get a rematch of that pretty good game from last week in my prediction, and I do have Purdue, like you said. Zach Edey, just nobody can match up with him in that league. I do like, of potential sleeper teams, I think Ohio State could make a run and win 2 or 3 games. Right now I have them picked to lose in the quarterfinals, but they've been playing a lot better basketball since they fired their head coach. And they're the only potential spoiler I could see for some of these teams like Northwestern, Nebraska, Illinois. But yeah, give me Purdue over Illinois in the championship.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Then heading on out west to the Pac-12 in a tournament that I think is going to be really fun, even if it doesn't have a lot of highly ranked teams that are projected to be super near the top of the field for March Madness. I think this tournament's going to be really fun. I have Washington State coming out on top in the final, but I have their opponent being UCLA. I think the Bruins are going to make a run through this tournament for no reason other than vibes. For some reason, I feel like UCLA is going to go on a run in this one. I cannot explain it whatsoever. I can't wait for them to lose in the first round since I've said that, but I think this UCLA team is going to make a run, and I do think Washington State comes out on top. They've had the season series over Arizona, which, of course, I would have UCLA beating Arizona in this scenario, but I think Washington State, just as far as a Pac-12 tournament, is the team I trust the most at this point.
Yeah, you're going to have to hear me out here. I'm actually going to take another Los Angeles school. I'm going to take the University of Southern California. This is the most talented team outside of Arizona in the Pac-12. They have not played like it for much of the season, but they are winners of 6 of their last 7 games, including a win against Arizona on Saturday, I believe it was, maybe Friday. This is a team just loaded with talent. Isaiah Collier, Bronny James is an incredible defender. They have several other top recruits that are freshmen. I kind of see this team as a worse version of Kentucky, just loaded with talent, has been struggling defensively, but I think they're figuring it out, and I figured if I'm going to pick one non-chalked tournament, it's going to be this one. I'm not high on the Pac-12 at all as a league. I'm especially not high on the Arizona Wildcats. I think if Caleb Love has an off night, they're an extremely vulnerable team, as we've seen throughout this season. So give me the Fighting Trojans of USC to win this one, punch their ticket to the big dance with the automatic bid, as they are not a team that is even close to the field in terms of an at-large bid. So I'm excited for this tournament. I think the Pac-12 tournament is going to go out with a bang, as we know this is the last one, as we know it at least, of moving forward. So give me USC.
Yeah, if that happens, I definitely wouldn't complain about it. That would be super fun to watch, and it's always fun to see an upset. So, finally, over to the Mountain West, a conference that has really been in the news a lot more than it's used to this season, with a lot of quality teams. And who do you think is going to come out on top of this tournament?
Yeah, so I've got Nevada in this tournament. I think that it's either going to be Nevada or Boise State. I believe that's the semifinal matchup. But Nevada did just win at Boise State, so I'm going to go with Nevada. Another team that our viewers and listeners should watch for in this game is UNLV. They're extremely hot right now, and the tournament will be played on their home floor over there in Las Vegas. So UNLV definitely going to be a tough out. They're going to have the most fans there by far. And I think this is an extremely deep conference in terms of relative to one another. Any team can beat any team on any given night, and that's kind of proven by the fact that Colorado State, who's been a pretty good team all season, is just a 7 seed. So really any one of those top 7 seeds, maybe even top 8 seeds, could make a run in this one, but give me Nevada.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this tournament's going to be very fun, and you said that Boise State-Nevada matchup, a winner of that, you like to win the league. Well, I'm taking Boise State to win that game and therefore come out on top in this tournament. I like this Boise State team. I think they're fun. And this Utah State team, I know they're the 1 seed, but for some reason I just don't trust them as much as I do a Boise State or a Nevada. So I like Boise in this one. I know they don't have a blue and orange court like they do for football, but I don't think they'll need it. They'll be able to go onto UNLV's court for this tournament and come out on top in this one.
Yeah, definitely a team that can really shoot the ball. Max Rice making a 37-foot shot nearly from half court to knock off San Diego State in overtime at San Diego State on Saturday. Or actually Friday night. That was an incredible game to watch. Max Rice, Tyson Degenhart, other players could really start to get hot in that tournament, and that's why they're my second favorite team to win it. But yeah, Boise State definitely going to be in the NCAA tournament as an at-large, a team that I actually got to watch in person as they came here to Clemson to face the Tigers in December. But yeah, definitely excited for that Mountain West tournament.
For sure, and I know we're both super excited to be in tournament season in general, whether it be a conference tournament or the big dance here in a couple weeks. But that's it for basketball today. Over to football. Free agency has officially started for the NFL, so a lot of stuff going down today as agents and teams are finally allowed to speak to each other outside of just re-signing. So it's been super fun to watch.
Please, Kirk Cousins, come to Atlanta.
I know.
Please.
You as a Falcons fan are wanting Kirk Cousins badly.
20 minutes later.
We recently just signed off recording our 3rd episode of the podcast, but immediately Samuel found some exciting news on Twitter that we felt warranted restarting the recording. So, Samuel, what is it?
Falcons fans, it is time to rejoice. You have your quarterback. Kirk Cousins has signed a 4-year deal with the Atlanta Falcons. our new look offense moving forward. I'm a Falcons fan, so I can say our new look offense moving forward. Kirk Cousins, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. We definitely need to sign or draft some receivers, but I am super excited moving forward with a new coaching staff and a new quarterback in this incredible offense that has underperformed in the last few seasons due to a lack of good QB play and a lack of good play calling. But I think we fixed both of those issues moving forward. Super ecstatic about this move. I've been wanting Kirk Cousins all offseason, and now it is finally official. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm really starting to love this offense a ton. I think Kirk Cousins is going to bring a lot to Atlanta. And then also Saquon Barkley signing with the Eagles, a massive blow to Giants fans, I'm sure, who might have nothing left to live for at this point. But so pray for your Giants fans. And as a Chargers fan, I'm just wanting any player that can breathe at this point. So starting off with the big QB domino that fell late last night, actually, as Russell Wilson signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers for just $1.2 million from the Steelers, as the Broncos are going to be footing the bill for that one. But I think Russ in Pittsburgh is an interesting experiment for that price. Why not? Because Kenny Pickett, I don't think, is it. And if you get I would say if you get 70% of Seattle Russell Wilson, you'll be happy with that move. But Denver Russell Wilson was not very good, so we'll have to see what happens. But what do you think? Do you think Wilson can come in and save this Pittsburgh offense with a familiar face, Arthur Smith, as the OC?
Yeah, you definitely kind of mentioned what my point was going to be. I think Russell Wilson's a really good player, definitely a lot better than Kenny Pickett. I've never been high on him at all. Never thought he was the answer in Pittsburgh. But yeah, this combination kind of makes me throw up a little bit. Russell Wilson on the kind of the downside of his career, and then Arthur Smith, just one of the worst play callers, I think, in the NFL, as proven by his performance the last couple years in Atlanta. Just been terrible play calling. I know he's had bad quarterback play with Desmond Ridder and Marcus Mariota, but I am not high on Arthur Smith at all. Obviously biased against him a little bit as a Falcons fan who is very disgruntled over the past few seasons. But I do not see this working out as a happy marriage. I think once you get Arthur Smith out of there, it might be something that works if Russell Wilson stays there long term. But I think any QB is doomed for failure with Arthur Smith calling plays at this point.
Yeah, one thing I especially worry about with this matchup is Arthur Smith's offense. When he does throw the ball, he loves to attack the middle of the field, and at this point in his career, I don't know how much zip Russell Wilson has left to make a lot of those throws. So like you said, I don't think the system is really a good mesh for Wilson's playing style, but you never know, I guess. The next QB domino to fall was Baker Mayfield, who signed a 3-year, $100 million extension to stay in Tampa. So the Bucs secure Baker for 3 more years of baking, and I honestly think that's a very good move for the Bucs. Baker was pretty decent down in Tampa this past season. I definitely think that it makes sense to give him a more extended shot.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of money to me, but I think Baker Mayfield definitely deserves it. What a career that he's had, just a real journeyman, going from being benched by the Panthers to being on the scout team defensive line. That was something to see. Then going over to the Rams in the middle of the season, winning a game for them after only being with the team for 5 days, and then now settling down in Tampa. I do think this is a good move for both sides. I like Baker Mayfield as a quarterback. A kind of a temporary fix right now as he's getting a little bit up there in age, but definitely a move that I like for both sides.
For sure. Then one of the biggest contracts to be handed out so far was Chris Jones staying in Kansas City for 5 more years, making an average of $31.75 million, with $95 million guaranteed on this contract. They will get him through his age 34 season, and for a position that regresses as lightly as defensive tackle, I think this is a great move for both sides, especially since the Chiefs have an out before the last year of this contract.
Yeah, definitely another great move for both sides. Chris Jones, obviously excited to stay in Kansas City as they go on their quest to win more Super Bowls. I think this puts their defense in a good position to continue to do that with their young secondary doing extremely well this past season. Chris Jones, definitely a vital piece to that front seven. I think he's going to continue to be dominant over at least the next 3 years, maybe even into that fourth and fifth year of the contract. Love the contract for Chris Jones, obviously. He's getting himself paid as he should, as he's been an integral part of this Chiefs dynasty. Can we call it a dynasty now? I think we can. Right?
I think we can, yeah. But I definitely love this signing, shoring up the interior of the defensive line. It also really helps your young edge rushers. George Karlaftis and Felix Onyedike-Uzomah really get more one-on-ones as more bodies are taken up stopping Jones in the middle. So I think that's a great move for the Chiefs. Then a guy that I know is pretty close to your heart, Christian Wilkins, leaving Miami, who decided not to franchise tag him for some reason, a move that I did not understand at all. I know Miami is in a little bit of cap hell right now, but that just didn't make sense at all to me. You can go super negative with a franchise tag, so why not do it anyways? But regardless, he ends up on the Raiders on a 4-year deal with $110 million base value and $84 million or almost $85 million guaranteed. I think he's a great player. I don't know how much he moves the needle for this Raiders team, because the defensive line, I think, was already one of your strengths. With Tyree Wilson and Max Crosby there, your real weakness was the interior. Now you've shored that up a lot, but you still have a bunch of dead fish playing secondary, so I don't really know how much this helps you, but definitely the addition of a very good player is always going to improve you at least a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely improves that defensive line depth for sure, but like you mentioned, that secondary just awful, and it's kind of fitting, in my opinion, that Wilkins, a very entertaining player on and off the field, always being a jokester on the field, messing with other players. Very fitting to me that he's going to Las Vegas, just the city itself. I don't know, I just find something funny about that. And yeah, he got himself paid pretty good as well with a lot of guaranteed money. So always good to see a Clemson man get paid, and hopefully he decides to give a little back so we can improve some facilities over here. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Sticking on the defensive line, the Vikings picked up former Texan Jonathan Grenard on a 4-year deal worth $76 million at $42 million guaranteed. I think Jonathan Grenard is a very underrated player, a guy that I loved at Florida. He was a very solid edge rusher and had a good season last year, putting up double-digit sacks. I know sacks aren't everything, but his pass rush win rate was also quite good. So I think a guy like that is going to be very valuable to a Minnesota team who, it seems like every year, no one knows what's happening with Danielle Hunter. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? So getting a good edge player secured like Grenard, I think, is going to do a lot for this Vikings team.
Yeah, and hopefully they've used all their money and don't have enough to re-sign Kirk Cousins. Once again, Kirk Cousins, please come to Atlanta. You know you want to. Kirk Cousins' wife is from Atlanta. I want Kirk Cousins to be the quarterback of my team for the next couple
The whole
years,
Kirko
please.
Change thing just fits with Atlanta too, doesn't it? That would be such a vibe.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Then another Clemson guy, I know, another guy you liked watching a lot, T. Higgins, who has been franchise tagged and has since requested a trade from Cincinnati. He reportedly was upset that there have been no talks from the Bengals about a long-term extension since March of last year and just wants to move on at this point, which, if I'm the Bengals, why not lock him up? Like, Tyler Boyd is getting up there in age. Jamar Chase is great, but you need more than 1.5 receivers. So
Yeah.
I don't know what they think they're doing up there. I know the Joe Burrow contract has got to be hurting them at this point, but this just doesn't make sense to me to not retain a player as good as T. Higgins. I feel like this is something you have to find a way to do, and I know they franchise tagged him, but I think this is looking like, especially after the request, a very likely tag and trade at this point.
Yeah, and I like that a non-Clemson guy is saying that, because I think T. Higgins has wide receiver 1 upside in the NFL, and any team that was able to get him in a trade would immediately get a great boost to their wide receiver room and maybe even their numbers throwing the ball in general. I think that it would be a very bad move, like you said, for Cincinnati to not lock him up for the foreseeable future, as that is a pretty scary pair between him and Jamar Chase. I know a lot of Clemson fans in the area would love to see him traded to either the Panthers or the Jaguars.
Oh, not the Panthers. Don't nuke his career like that.
Yeah, the Jaguars looking a little less likely with their signing of Gabe Davis here recently, but
which we'll get to that in a sec. Oh my goodness, we'll get to that.
A lot of Clemson fans in the area are Carolina Panthers fans and would like to see T. Higgins come home. I wouldn't like to see that for T. Higgins because that's a poverty franchise, but it would be exciting for the area fans. Honestly, just trade him back to Clemson. Clemson needs wide receivers. That's what's kept Clemson from being successful the past couple seasons, is a lack of wide receiver depth. I think it's getting better this season with a couple 4 and 5 stars coming in and TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco. But I yearn for the days when we had guys like Mike Williams and T. Higgins. Those are the best days to be a Clemson fan.
For sure. Then a signing that I absolutely hate is Gabe Davis to the Jags on a 3-year, $39 million deal with incentives for $50 million. Gabe Davis is a good deep threat. He's going to make a couple splash plays, and that's all he does. For a team that already has they're in the top 10 for cap committed to receivers, to then go out and make this signing instead of all the other needs you have, and then if you're going to get a receiver, surely there are better ones available. I don't understand this at all. I think the Jags continue to just kind of throw money at the wrong players and hope it sticks, which I guess it worked out okay with Christian Kirk, but are you telling me that Christian Kirk is a valuable number 1 receiver in the NFL? I still don't think so. And this receiving core just gets weirder and weirder every year. I'm not a big Gabe Davis guy in general. I think he's a fantasy football merchant. I think people like that he puts up big points in fantasy sometimes, and so they look past what he actually is, which is a good deep threat with a very limited route tree that's going to give you a couple splash plays. So I don't understand this signing at all from Jacksonville. Then they need to figure out what they're doing down there, honestly. They traded for Mac Jones. They traded
what was that about?
They traded a late round pick for Mac Jones to come back up Trevor Lawrence. You're telling me you couldn't go sign any backup quarterback that's gonna perform decent for you? Why are you giving up I know it's a late round pick, but draft capital is still draft capital. Why are you giving that up for Mac? Whatever. I don't understand what the Jags are doing, frankly. I think they have more money than sense right now, and they're throwing it all in the wrong places.
Yeah, I think Trent Baalke is one of the worst GMs in the National Football League, to be honest with you. Like you said, just throwing money at all the wrong places. It kind of worked out with Christian Kirk, but definitely way too much money there. And I think this Gabe Davis signing is going to prove to be even worse than that one. Not high on Davis at all on the field. Off the field, I think he's even more of a diva. He posted that 15-minute video to Buffalo fans upon his pretty much announcement that he was going to be a free agent and leave Buffalo. Not a big fan of that guy at all, and not a big fan of this signing by the Jags.
Yeah. In more receiver news, we have Jerry Jeudy to the Browns for a 4th and 6th round pick this year, and Amari Cooper Part 2, anyone? Are the Browns cooking again with these low compensation receiver trades? I think Jerry Jeudy definitely still has upside. He is a pretty solid route runner still, and the hands have been off and on, but I think in the right system he can definitely be developed. Has not had good QB play at all in Denver. Now, are you going to get that with Deshaun Watson? I don't know. The Deshaun Watson from Houston, we still have not really seen that player yet, and then I doubt we're getting another Linsanity run from Joe Flacco next season, so I still think Jerry Jeudy has a lot of potential, but will the QB play be able to support that development? I don't know. I definitely love taking this risk, though, if you're Cleveland.
Yeah, you said it. Deshaun Watson is the hinge point that's going to determine the success of this Browns team moving forward. You're going to have Nick Chubb coming off of that pretty brutal injury, so Deshaun Watson definitely going to need to return to those Houston days if the Browns are going to make that next step and go deep in the playoffs. I like this signing a little bit, not a lot. With Jerry Jeudy joining that wide receiver core with Amari Cooper. I think he's a pretty good wide receiver too, but like you said, it all is going to depend on Deshaun Watson returning to that big-time level.
Yeah, then your final receiver domino to fall was Mike Evans signing a 2-year, $52 million extension with the Buccaneers. I think this makes sense for both sides. Mike Evans, Tampa Bay Bucs legend, gets 1,000 receiving yards every year. His quarterback could be Mac Jones without legs, and he would still get 1,000 yards receiving somehow. He's one of the more reliable receivers in the entire league, so I think it's a great signing for other Florida team. A good signing for Tampa as they keep Mike Evans in town, keep a reliable weapon for Baker Mayfield, especially with You're not sure what the Chris Godwin contract situation is going to be next year. It's a little bit touch and go with that, so I definitely like this move.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. This is the team that was able to knock off Philly in the playoffs, actually get that playoff win, so it really makes sense to extend your QB and extend your wide receiver one, especially a guy like Mike Evans, who, like you said, always puts up the quietest 1,000-yard season in the history of the NFL, and he continues to do that every season. Just an extremely consistent guy on a week-to-week basis. Can catch a lot of contested passes as well as get open off the line. So really like this move for Tampa as well.
Now finally, the Bears, who have decided to sign the entire Eagles roster, but first they re-signed Jalen Johnson on a 4-year, $76 million deal. And even though this is, some people would say, a bit expensive, with the cap going up soon, I think this is a great deal for one of the league's premier corners. He's not going to blow by you with speed or anything, but he is an excellent technician, has great eyes in zone coverage. This is one of the more elite zone corners in all of football, and one of the best corners in football, period. I think he's been doing it very quietly. You're not going to get much press you are going to press sometimes, but different kind of press for being the CB1 for the Bears. But he's just been quietly going about his business, playing at a very high level, so kudos to Jalen Johnson. I think he definitely deserved this contract.
Yeah, and I'll kind of leave our analysis of him at that. I don't think I could add anything to that conversation, to be honest with you. But the Bears definitely trending in the right direction, in my opinion. I think that they're definitely going to draft Caleb Williams at number 1 overall, barring any surprises between now and the draft. Really interested to see what happens with Justin Fields. But
it looks like they might have both next season, because the trade market for Justin Fields apparently is not been good, and the Bears are asking for too much, so they might have both of those guys next season, which would definitely be interesting to watch. And in the backfield behind him is going to be DeAndre Swift, who signed a 3-year, $24 million extension, so I guess he can go push Justin Fields and or Caleb Williams now on tush-push plays instead of Jalen Hurts. So,
are we going to see any formations that have both quarterbacks in it?
That would be extremely fun.
Because you can take advantage of Fields' speed and then Caleb Williams' improv skills. I think that can make for some really fun football. It might not be the greatest football, but it would definitely be fun.
Entertaining, yeah. Triple option with DeAndre Swift, Justin Fields, and Caleb Williams. Who says no?
That would be incredible. Holy cow.
That's me on EA College Football 25 here in a few months. That's what I'm running my offense as.
For real, definitely.
Then the last signing for the Bears so far, they picked up Kevin Byard on a 2-year, $15 million deal. Kevin Byard is past his prime, but I think he's still a decent player, and for a team who had to let go of Eddie Jackson, who is very past his prime, I think this is a good replacement at the free safety position. So another decent signing for Chicago, who I think has actually been making some pretty good moves in free agency over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I like their moves for sure. I still really am not a huge fan of Eberflus as the coach at all. I think he's really limiting their potential, both as an offense and as a defense. I'm not a big fan of him at all. I think the Bears should have moved forward after this season. Although they finished strong, just not doing as well as the Chicago fan base expects. I know they're not too happy with him, but this is definitely going to be a make-or-break year for Eberflus, especially with these new signings.
Yeah, I completely agree, but I have to see how it goes. Then Tony Pollard over to the Titans to replace Derrick Henry, I would presume, as they're probably sending him somewhere else as a free agent. And I like this backfield duo of him and Tyjae Spears. I think it's going to be a very fun duo for Tennessee, and I honestly could see Tyjae Spears ending up in the RB1 role after what Tony Pollard did last year in Dallas, being kind of not great in that RB1 role that so many people thought he was ready for, but this, I think a split carries backfield between him and Spears would work very well for the Titans.
Yeah, I saw a meme on Twitter this morning as we were doing some show prep, and it was Tyjae Spears' RB1 season, and it was the video of Aaron Rodgers carrying out the flag for the Jets before their first game, which he ruptured his Achilles in. But this is a very interesting signing to me as well. What is it with the Titans signing old Cowboys running backs? They did it in the past with DeMarco Murray on the backside of his career, now doing it with Tony Pollard, who I think has a little bit more in the tank, but like you said, I think Tyjae Spears could end up regaining that RB1 title that he held for all of the offseason up to this point.
Yes.
But yeah, definitely an interesting signing for sure.
Then finally, not a signing or a trade, but Fletcher Cox did announce that he is retiring from football after a great career. So, one of the better Eagles of all time. I think you have to say absolute Eagles legend, great interior defensive lineman for a very long time. So, congratulations to Fletcher Cox on a long career. And for the Eagles, that interior defensive line duo you have is ready to step up now with Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. So although Fletcher Cox is retiring, don't think you're going to see a massive drop in production on the interior because those guys are both ready to go.
Yeah, the second Eagles legend to retire in the past few weeks, obviously with Jason Kelce, who in my opinion is the greatest center of all time, retiring, and now Fletcher Cox on the other side of the line there for the defense. Like you said, I'm really excited to see that interior defensive line tandem of Jordan Davis, and then who's the other guy? I forgot his name.
Jalen Carter.
Jalen Carter, yes. I think he was one of the better players in the NFL draft, and I think he would have gone a lot earlier were it not for his criminal investigations. Then they're also looking to keep Hassan Reddick, I believe, so definitely a pretty good defense still moving forward. Got to retool that secondary a little bit, as that was definitely their weak point there in the postseason. But yeah, a couple Eagles legends retiring here pretty similar windows. Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce, great careers.
For sure. Well, that is it for this episode of SM Sports Radio, and we will be back next week with some conference tournament recaps and getting you guys set up for March Madness. So anything you have to add, Samuel?
No, just be ready next week for a lot of basketball talk, as we will have a bracket for next week's show. We'll dive into that. Super excited to work on that content and bring it to you on all of our platforms.
For sure. We'll see you guys next week.